Snowpiercer is thrilling, immersive, and constantly compelling. The TNT TV series, on the other hand, not so much. We're kind of having a Bong Joon-ho moment right now. It's interesting because obviously Parasite just won Best Picture, and I think that he's kind of starting to go the way of Christopher Nolan, where people are starting to hate on him because of his success. But I think, he is a thought-provoking filmmaker, and Snowpiercer was not one of his greatest films, in my opinion, but it was a good film by Bong Joon-ho. And I was excited for this TV series, and as I kind of hinted in my teaser, I was a little bit disappointed, to say the least. But before I get into my specific thoughts, if you're new to the channel and if you're interested in seeing my reviews of other shows and movies and other entertainment, then I highly recommend subscribing. I welcome you to do that so that you don't miss any of my other awesome videos as I put them out. So, getting into Snowpiercer. So, I think that it was interesting because I was a little bit curious how they were going to do this show, because when you look at the original movie, it had a very, very simple concept that works well for a 2-hour movie, but it was a little bit nebulous to me how they were going to transform this into a TV series, because in the movie with Chris Evans and Octavia Spencer and all the other great cast of actors, what you had this straightforward action movie where the characters were just moving from one car to the next trying to get to the front. And that forward momentum really carried the story forward, and it helped you to not think about some of the problems with the world building and some of the shortfalls of the explanations that we were being given. And, the story was meant to function more, I think, as an extended metaphor than as like a reasonable sci-fi premise anyway. So that causes a number of problems for this TV series right off the bat, because a TV series has to have a different structure than a film. You can't just have the characters moving from car to car the way they did in the film, because that would become repetitive really quickly, and you'd have to make them get really stuck in a car and not move quickly at all for the story to continue for any length of time. So they don't do that here, and what they've come up with is a rather inelegant solution that strains credulity, and it's that the main character, played by Daveed Diggs, is the only person on the train qualified to solve a mystery, because the person who created this train, a mysterious entity, didn't foresee that rich people would murder each other, so he didn't put anybody on the train who could solve a murder. So Daveed Diggs' character is the only one capable of solving a murder as a former detective on the Detroit police force. So right off the bat, that, like I said, that premise strains credulity that they wouldn't have had some kind of plan in place for this, since everything else on this train is planned out so precisely due to the fact that you need this ecosystem to function in balance. And, there was a lot of explanations for this in the movie that, while were a little bit, again, straining credulity, at least they made sense from a metaphorical standpoint, and they added to the layers of social commentary. But here, there's really not much social commentary, at least other than on a surface level, because I think there's obviously some social commentary inherent in the premise that was, the movie originated. And here, it's without that social commentary. I feel like a lot of this, it's trying to focus on it the way that a sci-fi original series would on the world building, and I feel like the premise doesn't make enough sense for this to be explored too deeply without straining credulity even further. But there's not just bad things here. There are a number of good things, and I'm going to get into those before I give my final criticisms of this show. So I definitely like Daveed Diggs as the protagonist, and I understand why they made him this detective character who's trying to solve a mystery. That made sense from a structural perspective, and I think that he is likable and charismatic enough as an actor. I do, however, think that he is poorly cast. And the reason I would argue that is because he's basically playing the hard-boiled detective character. And there's just nothing hard-boiled about Daveed Diggs. He comes off a little too smooth, a little bit too articulate, and I think that they would have been better off with an actor who was more gravelly, who kind of spit his lines, someone that kind of had a more Samuel L. Jackson or Harrison Ford vibe, I think would have worked better for this type of a story. I also think that Jennifer Connolly in her role is easily, from my perspective, the highlight of the show. She was probably the actress that I thought gave this project the most credibility coming into it as an Oscar winner and someone who's kind of just fallen out of Hollywood and not someone you see around films a whole lot anymore. And, you know, she's quite good here. I think she has a very nuanced delivery and she's kind of giving a lot of side eye, and a lot of her character is what she's not saying. And I think that she's, you know, just a sexy and intriguing character. If I have one problem with her, though, it's that she's not playing the character in an authoritative enough fashion. I feel like she seems like she lacks control of situations and she seems easily thrown off. And I don't think that a character in her position, especially the more we learn about her as the episode goes on, I don't think that this is how she would be. I also appreciated that there's a number of other pretty talented actors in the cast. Allison Wright from The Americans, which I was surprised to learn who is from England. I never knew that she was an English actress before. Her American accent in The Americans was just perfect. And here she hasn't had a lot to do yet, but I'm excited to see her in the cast. I also enjoyed Mark Margulies from Breaking Bad, another actor who I didn't realize what he sounds like in interviews, but he just has a normal accent because he's from Philadelphia. And Katie McGinnis, who I recently enjoyed in Hollywood as Vivian Leigh. And they, again, none of these characters made much of an impression in the first episode, but I feel like there would be room for them to develop as the show goes on in most cases. And, you know, I'm intrigued by the performances that they have given so far. But this is where my positives with the show basically end, because the show, as I said, has a lot of problems. And the first problem is that every character is basically playing Basil exposition. And just the dialogue is just horrendous. And it's really hard for any actor to come off too well when they're being forced to say lines like, "You remember the Year 3 rebellion?" Yes, everyone here does, so why are you bringing it up? And then you have a character saying, "I'm the last Australian," just so that we know how bad things have got because the world is running out of Australians. And there's just tons of lines like that just, it tells, and it doesn't do enough showing. Also, this show has a ridiculously cheap production design. I thought that it had an okay visual style at first, but then it settled into its natural flow, and it's a bunch of static shots in rooms of characters sitting around in murky environments. Now, the front of the train is obviously more visually appealing than the back of the train, but they shoot it in a bunch of tight shots because they just don't have big sets. They don't have really interestingly designed sets. And the colors and overall just the atmosphere is just lacking, and it just feels like something you would see on the Sci-Fi Channel. It's just very, very cheap cut rate production, and they're trying to cover it up by not showing you very much of it and directing it in a very, very claustrophobic fashion, but not for atmosphere. I truly believe they're shooting it this way because they just know that there's nothing for you to see. And it's not particularly skilled direction either. It's very pedestrian. But I think the biggest thing that really hurts this show is it's just trafficking constantly in cliches, and it's completely lacking in subtlety. The subtlety, you wouldn't exactly accuse the original movie of being subtle, but the social commentary and all the thought-provoking ideas that were present there are completely lacking here. And instead what you get is just dumb, blunt force action and survival drama, and it's you know, if you enjoy that, it's not even the best at it that I've seen. But I guess you could enjoy that aspect of it. But the world building is just not that good so far. And it's really just relying on it's turned what was a more elegant story into a very, very straightforward premise, and basically diluted all the aspects of the original that were interesting in the process. There's a twist at the end of the episode that I think is designed to leave the viewer with a strong impression. And I'll admit, I did like the twist and it made sense. And it added to my understanding of some of what was going on in the story. But again, it was done in a very unsubtle way. And just to make sure, because they made it clear at every point that they think the audience is stupid and they need to tell us everything. And there were lines, like there was a scene where Daveed Diggs' character was very clearly in a perilous position, and a character walks up to him and says, "You're in a tight spot." And it's like, duh. The audience can pick up on that. You don't have to have a character tell him he's in a tight spot. We already know that. We're not stupid. And the whole show just spoon feeds the audience everything. And frankly, I mean, if you're someone who likes sci-fi, I just don't think that this has a lot of heavy sci-fi to hold your attention. So, in summary, I don't think that this show has justified its existence. If you are interested in this story and you haven't already seen the movie, I highly recommend checking the movie out. If you've already seen the movie, don't watch this. You'll hate it, I'm pretty sure. So those are my thoughts. If you have different thoughts, let me know in the comments. I am genuinely interested in hearing other opinions on this. If you enjoyed it, if you think I'm being too harsh in any way, let me know in the comments. I'm interested to hear. And as I said before, I'm going to be doing lots of other reviews. I do reviews of shows that I'm watching on a weekly basis, and I do reviews of new shows as they come out. So please consider subscribing to the channel if you are interested in any of that. And as always, you can watch other videos right now.